This afternoon, the city manager's preview of the upcoming budget.
Hey, Bunny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Robin, maybe, or Brian is going to assist with the slide advancement on this one. It's very rare that I think only one time a year I actually do a presentation myself, and that's when we do the manager recommended budget highlights, which we're going to do today. Just before we get started in that, for everyone's recollection, the manager's recommended budget by charter comes out on April 15th or the Friday before if it happens to be on a weekend. This year, April 15th is on a Friday, and so on Friday we will be releasing our budget. And we, when we release the actual budget, we make that available to the public in a variety of ways, including putting copies in the branch libraries and putting it online, and certainly council members will get the thick book themselves. But what we like to do, since this is the meeting right before the release of the budget, and we won't meet for 2 weeks again, and then when we meet in 2 weeks it will be our first public budget hearing, is I like to try to highlight what you're going to see when that budget is released on Friday. And in doing so, I'll basically summarize the manager's recommended budget message, which by requirement ought to really highlight the most significant changes and issues that are embedded in the budget. So with that, I'll begin by saying that this year's budget that will be released will total $463,091,719, and this is a 2.8% increase over the fiscal 2016 budget. Of this total amount, the city's operating portion is $183,323,388, or about 39.6%. We also, by law, adopt the school's total operating portion, which in this case is $200,450,417, or 43.3%, as well as other items such as the debt and capital for the city and schools, the regional entities, and our other obligations of this ilk, which is about $79 million, or 17.1%. This is the 7th budget I've prepared since becoming city manager. Although this budget, like previous ones, is austere, it represents Hampton's first meaningful uptick in property values in as many years. The property value improvement has, along with our strong sales and meals tax growth, I want to emphasize that we continue to have strong sales and meals tax growth, which we attribute to our reinvestment in our retail corridors, has enabled us to propose a budget that not only maintains current service levels, but also reinvests in both our community and our employees. And we do this without the need for a tax increase. Specifically, this budget invests in education, public safety, neighborhoods, and employee compensation. Our top budget priority this year was to continue to address compensation by implementing adjustments to address wage compression in the workforce and to provide a general wage increase for city staff. In fiscal 16, the current year that we're in, we began to implement the recommendations from the salary study that we commissioned in fiscal 2015, and this budget continues that implementation. I cannot adequately express how deserving our employees are of these adjustments. As you know, they have continued to work hard and have been steadfast in their dedication and support of the community, even when the national, state, and local economy did not support consistent salary increases. The recession's impact on them was significant, and as we continue to emerge from those challenging times, it is important that we provide competitive pay for the great services they provide to our community. Although our revenue has improved, we nevertheless looked for internal savings to ensure we could provide meaningful enhancements to our priority areas. Internal efficiency is a hallmark of the Hampton organization, and I'm pleased we were able to generate some savings to enhance these investments. Other than in the case of Parks, Recreation, and Leisure Services, which was reorganized to enhance operations and in which there were savings from last year's closure of the Old Hampton Community Center, there are no employee impacts. I'm pleased to report that this budget proposes no increases in user fees the city controls. There will be no increase in solid waste, wastewater, or stormwater user fees for residents or businesses this year. Overall, I believe this budget represents the best work our staff could collectively deliver for our community, and I'm proud to highlight each of these areas in more detail. And I'll start with community budget input, because unlike other localities, our organization seeks citizen budget input before we finalize a manager's recommended budget. We believe the product is better when we know what residents expect and want. Over the past 6 years, the public's been asked many questions, and we continue to use the guidance provided not just this year, but in past years as our budget has been developed. The sessions and the residents' input have been invaluable, particularly as hard choices had to be made in past years. Fortunately, this year, our revenue situation had significantly improved, such that we didn't project the need for significant service cuts or tax increases. So we took a different approach and held town hall-style input sessions online and in person. The feedback received generally centered around the desire to continue to reinvest in the community, especially in the areas of education, public safety, neighborhoods, and employees. Thus, I believe you will find this budget aligns with the community input provided. In terms of education funding, as you heard earlier today when in your joint meeting with the schools, there is improvement for the first time in the state funding of schools. We also have increased our local funding to schools. And I want to acknowledge that through the challenging times, the city maintained our commitment to our schools, as we will do this year. Our local school funding formula calls for the city and school system to share residential tax base growth or decline. Our residential property tax base is continuing to recover from the national housing crisis. However, it rose enough to boost our contribution to the schools by nearly $360,000. In fiscal 17, the city's operating budget contribution is $33.8 million, or 90% more than the requirement the state imposes on our local contribution. And I want to state that because it does reflect this council's commitment to education. Under the state funding formula, Hampton's contribution is required to be $33.8 million less than what we do. We, because we believe in education, exceed that state funding formula requirement and put $33.8 million more, or basically 90% more than that formula requires. Additionally, above and beyond that, this budget maintains our capital commitments to our school division with nearly $5.3 million set aside for school maintenance and upgrades, as well as $2 million for the one-to-one technology initiative. However, as I mentioned earlier, the most welcome news on the education front is the state has finally started to take steps to increase education funding. Since the recession, the state had cut about $24 million from our school system. And this year's approved budget increases improves Hampton City Schools funding by nearly $5 million. So they have about $19 million more to go, but we are headed in the right direction. Strong schools are not only essential for the students who attend them, but they also contribute to the city's economic growth as businesses and families base their investment decisions, at least in part, on school quality. Our schools consistently perform better than other urban districts across all measures. Our schools have continued to make exciting advancements by focusing on career-based academies and becoming the first urban district in our area to commit to provide tablet devices to all middle school and high school students. These investments are paying dividends. Earlier this fiscal year, the Ford Next Generation Learning Institute selected Hampton City Schools as one of its Career Academy partnerships. And just this month, Hampton City Schools was selected as the most technologically advanced school system in the nation. These advancements would not be possible without our excellent teachers who prepare our youth for the future. I am pleased that between the state and local increased revenue, the schools will be able to provide a 3% pay increase for our teachers and all support staff. Focusing on public safety, another priority not only for council but for the community. Over the last year, all Hampton Roads localities have experienced an uptick in crime, especially in youth violence and robberies. While our police cannot be expected to solve this challenge on their own, as it takes a whole community, it is critical that the city staff and equip our officers with the resources they need to do their part exceedingly well. There is also a need to work with neighborhoods so residents can unite to be strong partners with the police. Were it not for the many projected retirements in our public safety area, this budget would have funded new police officers. However, the chief has indicated he cannot fill new positions in addition to expected vacancies due to the amount of training time the jobs require. Therefore, we have provided extra funding for the chief to enhance patrols with retired officers who are willing to work part-time. Once the retirement-generated vacancies are filled and we increase our academy staffing capability, permanent staffing will be expanded with permanent full-time positions. We continue to look for ways to maximize the efficiency of the force we have. When a captain who oversaw animal control retired recently, we converted it to a civilian manager position. Having a professionally trained civilian will both improve animal control services and minimize the need from oversight from the police department, enabling them to focus exclusively on community policing and enforcement. Savings from this conversion was also used to add one patrol officer position to HPD's manning. This budget provides funding to equip all of our police force on the street with body cameras and tasers and cover the maintenance, replacement, and data storage for these devices. The recommended budget also provides additional funding for equipping auxiliary officers and police vehicles, as well as lease space for expanded police operations. Through capital budget reengineering funds, we will work to create a real-time data center to unite all of our camera systems into one integrated analytics unit. Together, these investments ensure our officers have the necessary tools to do their jobs even better. To fund these fiscal 17 police enhancements, the budget shifts $500,000 from City Council strategic priority funds in the capital budget to the operating budget. These funds come from a dedicated portion of the tax rate that was reserved for strategic investments and can be shifted for ongoing expenses such as these, which clearly are in alignment with both council and community strategic priorities. I am recommending this action so the necessary investments can be made in public safety to combat the rising crime rate that is impacting cities across the nation and to ensure that officers have the tools they need to be successful in today's environment. The budget continues the transition of the costs from the youth violence prevention initiatives to the general fund. These initiatives were originally funded with alcohol, tobacco, and firearms funds on a pilot program basis. Due to the success of these programs and our depletion of the ATF funds, we have been gradually transitioning them to be fully supported by the general fund. The budget also funds 2 family support specialists previously covered with court service unit departmental savings to permanent positions in the general fund to continue our prevention and early intervention partnership with the schools. The budget continues investments in fire and rescue by picking up 10 medic firefighter positions originally funded with a federal SAFER grant. These positions have enhanced coverage throughout the city, leading in part to our recent selection as one of only 148 fire divisions with the top ISO rating. Strong neighborhood organizations can be a powerful tool in fighting crime. During the recession, our neighborhood staff was downsized as a necessary budget-saving measure. With less staff, we have been unable to work with as many neighborhoods to do outreach, training, and to assist organizations in gaining the capacity to be strong partners. The improved revenue picture has allowed the restoration of one neighborhood development associate in the Community Development Department to take on more of this work. Finally, the backlog of neighborhood requests for additional streetlights will be addressed. There are sufficient streetlights for traffic safety in our community, but greater lighting enhances a neighborhood's sense of safety and acts as a deterrent to criminal behavior. This budget includes an additional $100,000 in recurring revenue to respond to public safety-related street lighting requests. Turning to our other city operating departments, we reinvest in them as well. First, this budget institutes a computer replacement program. Addressing computer replacement was one of the top operational priorities identified by our city's department directors. Due to strong management by city department heads, each year city departments generate budget savings. In the past, 65% of the savings was made available to departments to address some of their needs. Departments often use the savings to make technology purchases, such as replacing old computers and investing in new technology. This program was suspended during the recession to provide additional flexibility to deal with financial challenges. Since the recession, the budget savings generated has been accruing as part of a committed fund balance and has primarily been used to support city departments and employees. For example, departmental savings have been used to cover one-time employee bonuses, often in years when we were not able to give pay increases. Because the economy has finally begun to improve, I am proposing the savings program be reinstated. Previously, departments retained 65% of any savings generated. Department heads have proposed, and management concurs, that the former program be modified to dedicate 15% of the savings to a computer replacement program that will refresh community-based computers, such as those in our libraries and community centers, which are public use, as well as those used by employees every 5 years. The changes to the program will enable the departments to retain 50% of their savings. The fiscal 17 budget begins the computer replacement program for our community, facilities, and our employees by appropriating $500,000 from the departmental savings committed fund balance program. The budget also proposes the addition of an employee relations manager and human resources to enhance supervisory and leadership training for our workforce. During the recession, most of our training was outsourced and reduced in frequency. While this sufficed as a short-term saving strategy, we can only continue to excel as an organization when training is provided for our staff on a routine basis. Since our workforce is aging and there are projected retirements and leadership positions in coming years, an Emerging Leaders program will also be instituted to give our millennial workforce the opportunity to enhance their skills and prepare for future executive leadership. Our departments have been excellent stewards of public funds, consistently finding innovative ways to stretch funding to meet community needs. However, most departments have been stagnant or declining since the recession, even in the face of rising cost. Had there been even more revenue growth, reinvestment in other city departments would have certainly been in order. However, by instituting the computer replacement program, making needed investments in public safety equipment, and restoring some of the cuts we made during the recession, I believe this budget starts us on the path of addressing some of our most pressing needs. We will need to continue down this path of reinvestment in future fiscal years. I must also note Hampton consistently offers comparable levels of service at lower cost when compared to other jurisdictions, a testament to the commitment, hard work, and innovation of our managers and staff. Which leads me to employee compensation. As I noted previously, employee compensation was our highest priority for the fiscal 17 budget, after ensuring continued levels of service without a tax increase. I am pleased to report that the recommended budget honors this commitment with an overall 3% increase for employee compensation. This will be distributed as a 2% general wage increase for all employees, plus $1 million to address compression. When the city was unable to give annual raises during the recession, many employees' salaries were stuck near the beginning of the scale, leaving some experienced workers making roughly the same as some employees new to their positions. The only way to fully address compression would be to go back and give everyone a raise for each of the years they missed. This is simply not realistic or financially feasible for any locality. The details of how the $1 million for compression adjustments will be distributed are still being finalized. However, in general, employees will receive varying amounts based upon their seniority and experience in their position. This will feather our employees with their new salary ranges, within our new salary ranges, and provide some spread for those who have worked in their positions longer. This budget also includes funding to once again cover the projected 7% increase in employee health insurance premiums. By doing so, employees will receive a larger take-home pay increase than otherwise would have been possible. The budget also continues to cover the employee portion of the life insurance premiums. Normal city practice would call for insurance premiums to be split between the city and employees. However, as we work to bring our salaries up after such a long period of inconsistent raises, we believe fully covering the premium changes is essential so our workers feel the full effect of the salary increases being provided. Once our employees consistently receive salary increases again, the practice of shared premium increases will resume. Last but not least, this budget funds a citizen satisfaction bonus program that provides a mid-year bonus based upon the percentage of residents who express satisfaction with the way employees perform their jobs. This bonus will be funded out of end-of-the-year departmental savings, as was done this year. Doing so is appropriate since it is our employees who generate the savings. Tying the bonus to the citizen satisfaction provides a critical link between employees and the customers they serve. Taken together, this compensation package exceeds a 3% increase for employees overall and will keep us competitive with our peer communities in the region. While some employees will receive more and some less than the overall average of 3%, depending upon how they benefit from compression, this reflects the strongest possible commitment that could be made to our employees this year. These pay increases will go into effect in July of 2016. Investments in our workforce are reflective of a shared management and council commitment to consistent, sustainable wages as a primary budget priority as we exit the recession and return to more sustainable revenue growth. In terms of operational efficiency, over the past 6 years, we reorganized departments to streamline and create efficiencies. More than 125 positions were eliminated during the recession. Although Hampton ranks as one of, if not the most efficient government in Hampton Roads relative to population size, we continue to work to identify opportunities to be more efficient. This year was no different. 2 initiatives that came out of last year's budget are coming to fruition this year. The first is the merger of the Hampton and Newport News health departments, which saved the city approximately $150,000. The second is the implementation of an energy efficiency initiative that will centralize temperature controls across city buildings, which is projected to save another $150,000. The city is also experiencing the benefit of investment earning recovery in both the Hampton retirement system, known as HERS, and the Virginia retirement system, known as VRS. Stronger investment earnings for HERS and VRS more than offset the increase in employee health insurance and saved the city over $2 million, which was reinvested in employee salary and benefit enhancements. 2 other savings measures taken include decreasing the subsidy to the Coliseum and Arts Commission by $100,000 due to the strong performance since the merger of the 2 functions, as well as $108,000 in debt service savings from the refinancing of the Motorola radio equipment lease for public safety. While we continue to work to identify opportunities for savings, budget cuts made since the recession have made more reductions extremely challenging. In fact, as I've already alluded to, we need to start to reinvest in these city operating departments. Additional cuts would result in significant service reductions, elimination of services the public highly values, or disinvestment in our infrastructure and economic development efforts. I'd like to touch finally on our other strategic priorities that Council has adopted in concert with the community as we continue to invest in each of them. In addition to the safe and clean or public safety goals that I already addressed, as well as education and workforce discussed previously, the budget continues strategic investments in other council and community identified priority areas. In addition to employee compensation initiatives that help to foster good government, the budget supports the rollout of a new 311 smartphone application to enhance customer service, as well as the expenses associated with the improved legislative management system. We have several projects in the capital budget that relate to living with the water, including funding for the Continued Dutch Dialogues initiative. Our capital budget also includes important investments in economic growth, such as funds for strategic acquisition and redevelopment initiatives. Our past economic development efforts have clearly been effective in growing our tax base, as evidenced by the strong growth in retail meal sales and development momentum that is being seen in key areas of the city. These funds will help to continue to build the momentum. Placemaking initiatives such as streetscape projects are also included in the capital budget. A full-time placemaking coordinator to focus on Council's vibrancy efforts, such as activating our waterways, has been transferred from the Parks and Recs Department to the City Manager's office. Continued reinvestment in our community will ensure that Hampton remains a vibrant waterfront community in which people choose to live, work, play, and invest, and help us to fulfill our strategic vision. I am pleased that we have been able to recommend a budget that provides a meaningful raise to our employees, continues our strategic investments, and maintains our current service levels without increasing taxes or fees. As with last year's budget, there is reason to be optimistic about next year. Private investment in our community continues to grow as we come out of the recession. The new owners of the Peninsula Town Center continue to invest in their property. We are also seeing continued signs of reinvestment and redevelopment in the city, ranging from the $60 million formerly known as Riverdale redevelopment, to smaller projects like Cookout and multiple Wawa openings. Coliseum Crossing has also announced an expansion which will bring new retailers and restaurants to Hampton. Langley Federal Credit Union is building its largest and most modern branch in Coliseum Central, and two German grocers have announced new stores in Hampton. NASA Langley continues to move forward with its $330 million reinvestment plan, and Langley Air Force Base is well positioned to benefit from future Air Force consolidation initiatives. Major economic development deals are also in the works and will continue to be rolled out later this year. Much of this new development is the result of the investments the city has made to grow our economy and tax base. The recommended budget continues to make these investments by moving City Council's strategic priorities forward. I believe our momentum will continue to build as the economy improves and businesses and families continue to choose Hampton. Without a doubt, the recession made for many tough budget years. While I'm pleased that there is continued improvement, we have not yet completely recovered from the recession. While there is some assessment growth, 1.1% is still small and well below the historic trend. Nevertheless, tax increases, and service cuts have been avoided this year. We have also been able to continue to take steps towards meaningful pay increases to retain, attract, and reward our world-class staff and reinvest in our community. These are major achievements. However, they are but a beginning. There's more work to be done, but I know we can and will do it together. As I reflect on the past years and the ones ahead, I am proud of how our citizens, businesses, staff, and elected officials have all consistently pulled together during difficult times to keep Hampton's quality of life strong. We have shown that we are willing to make tough choices when necessary, whether that is restructuring the staff or supporting a higher tax rate that offsets a decline in property values. We have committed to focusing on increasing growth in the commercial tax base, housing stock, and reinvesting in our community. These tough decisions have served us well, and we are now beginning to reap the benefits of the sacrifices made during the recessionary years. Our ability to reinvest in our employees is but one example. Challenges remain, as we are not back yet to the days with predictable, solid revenue growth. However, I firmly believe our financial picture will continue to improve in coming years. Our city has indeed a bright future. We are Hampton, a vibrant waterfront community celebrating and embracing 400 years of history and innovation to create an even more dynamic future. I would like to publicly acknowledge and thank the wonderful group of department heads, assistant city managers, and our budget team for meeting the challenge. I would also like to thank our residents for their continued participation and input in our budget development process. We look forward to working with each council member in the coming weeks to help you to better understand our budget, its impacts on our community and the workforce. As always, we stand ready to assist you and the community in your deliberations.
Very good. Any questions? Madam Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Manager. I'm delighted to be presented with a recommended budget that doesn't increase taxes or fees.
We like being able to do that.
That's good news for our citizens. This is not a comment for the FY17 budget, but one of the best assets I think Hampton developed in the years before the recession was our neighborhood office, which has now been rolled into community development. And I think in the years when the neighborhood office was at full strength, that our community really benefited from the services, and we developed some strong neighborhood organizations, which I think many of which have remained strong and continue to grow, and some of which have kind of fallen by the wayside. So what I'm asking the manager and the council to consider over the next several years, not necessarily this year, that we continue to try to focus on that, and that as we are able to restore positions that we previously cut in our efficiencies and going through the recession, that might be a priority.
Absolutely.
Because I think our neighborhood initiatives absolutely distinguished us from our neighbors, both locally, regionally, and throughout the state. And I think it was one of the best things we ever did. And we have benefits to show from it, but I think we could continue to strengthen our neighborhoods if we had some more resources. So as time goes on, I'd like to look at that as a priority.
Well, and I definitely share that priority. You'll note, and I know I covered a lot of information pretty quickly, but we have basically 2 new positions in the budget, and one of those 2 new positions in the budget is indeed a neighborhood office worker. It's one of the restorations. I would like to, frankly, I was trying to get 2 in the budget this year, and with employee compensation, we really wanted to stretch ourselves and do as much as possible for our workforce. So in the end, I was only able to fit 1 new in. But you have my personal commitment, because I share your belief about the strength of our neighborhood initiative, and it was probably one of the most painful things we had to scale back on in the recession. And we've talked often about how it's important that we add back capacity as we are able, and I'm pleased that of the 2 net new positions we have in this budget, one of them is for neighborhoods.
Any other comments, ladies and gentlemen, prior to starting?
I do have another
Yes,
comment. I know this is not this was just your highlights.
Right.
But I wanted to ask you in advance of Friday, when the big budget comes out, about funding for Phoebus partnership.
Right.
I met with them and have had a number of emails back and forth with them throughout the late winter and spring. And the city previously funded them through CDBG funds. And I think for the last 2 years, we've given them a little over $20,000 to help them with their expenses and meet their goals. Their funding is significantly dwindling, and I have great concerns about that. Phoebus is the gateway to Fort Monroe. There are many exciting things going on at Fort Monroe presently and in the times to come. So for me, some more investment in Phoebus and their activities is a wise investment of our funds. They had some amazing long-range plans, that some of which were pretty simple, like things like bike racks, which feeds into the
Placemaking initiative.
the placemaking
Absolutely.
initiatives and all of that, to a retail business incubator with pop-ups and that sort of thing, which I think is really particularly suited to Phoebus, to a digital tourism kiosk that sits on one end of the street as you go into Fort Monroe. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities there. But I think, again, Phoebus has continued to develop its private sector, particularly their restaurants have continued to develop, and it's just magnificent what's going on down there. But I would not like to see them falter at this pretty critical point. So if, could you explore perhaps some opportunities for some
Absolutely.
funding?
We've been, and this isn't in the budget that will be released on Friday per se, because there's not a place to put what I'm about to describe. But the way we've been thinking about Phoebus, and just to refresh everyone's memory, the reason why the CDBG funds dwindled was because they weren't meeting the requirements that the federal government required. And so we couldn't continue to use CDBG funds. And that's when we gave them roughly $20,000 of general fund money. I don't remember the exact number. And they started then drawing down on the funds that you were describing. And we know that's been coming. One of the things we've thought about as a staff is how do we best help a group like the Phoebus Partnership, short of writing a check for their entire operation. And with the bids that we have in downtown and Coliseum Central, they actually self-tax themselves, but Phoebus isn't large enough to do that. They have explored it with us, and we've explored it with them, but they're just not big enough. And so the same vehicle that we participate with Coliseum Central and downtown just doesn't exist for Phoebus. So we've thought a lot about, well, how do we do that? And our best thinking right now is to have what I would call incentive funds, where we can do cross promotions, cross marketing. Take as an example the bike initiative that you mentioned. That happens to align very nicely with our placemaking initiative. That's something that all of us have envisioned having not only in Phoebus but in downtown and other places. So we have different pots of money, like placemaking money, that we could tap into for Phoebus. In our economic development department, we have some incentive funds to do cross-marketing. If they wanted to do a pop-up retail incubator, which I actually saw one on my spring break trip with my children at Chelsea Market that I just thought was wonderful, and I can see applying very nicely in Phoebus, we can do that out of economic development funds. So the traditional way of just giving them an increase in their funding may not be the best way. The best way to address some of their needs may be to say, if you want to do the tourism kiosk, we will apply CDB funds there. If you want to do cross-marketing or pop-up retail incubation, we use economic development funds. And if you want to do biking or special events, then we look at our placemaking funds, but have a very targeted, initiative to help them advance specific agendas as opposed to funding the operation itself. And there are, I don't want to say there are ample funds, because we never have enough to do everything we want to do, but I feel like our departments that I just mentioned that would align very nicely with some of the things you mentioned have some flexibility to be able to provide funding when we have those clear alignments with our mission, and we would want to do that with Phoebus. And so perhaps over the next couple of weeks we can explore, maybe I can even sit down with some of the leadership that you've been talking to explore how some of these concepts might work in a very meaningful way.
And I'd be happy to participate in that as well, thanks.
Okay.
Also, while we're considering the needs of Phoebus, we need to be sure that we are responsive to their apprehension in terms of how the Maida property is developed ultimately. They have some pretty definitive ideas in terms of how they want to do that, so we want to be sure that we can address the needs of the owner of the property as well as the needs and desires of the community itself in terms of how that meshes and comes together, and make resources available for that situation to help materialize. And the other thing is the dinghy pier that there's desires about in the community. So look at all those particular options in terms of how we can assist them.
Actually, since you mentioned the Phoebus dinghy dock, that's something that we have been working with the partnership on for some time, and we're sort of asking, can it get in the CIP? And for various reasons, that request didn't make it in the CIP this year. But when Mr. Peterson and I noted that towards the end of the process, we really felt like it was a missed opportunity, because the idea of the dinghy dock really fulfills part of that placemaking initiative of activating the waterfront. And so Mr. Peterson has been working on identifying some funds that were previously committed to a project that aren't being used for that project, to see if we can come up with enough funds to do the dinghy dock. I think he's going to have something in the Friday memo this week describing how we might be able to do that. So that wouldn't need to be in the 17 budget. It might actually be something we can advance this current fiscal year.
That's good news. Any other comments, ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture?